A revolved boss base feature allows you to create geometry about an axis using a profile you drop in a sketch. In this case, we'll be drawing up this wheel using a revolve feature to create the initial profile, and then we'll use a series of cuts and patterns to finish off the wheel. To start, we'll open up a new document. And before going into creating the wheel, I'll cover the basics of how a revolve works. So first we'll grab the front plane and create a sketch on it. And I'm going to grab the corner rectangle tool and just draw up a rectangle at the origin. From there, I'm not going to add in any dimensions. I'll just go ahead and go into the Features tab and choose Revolved Boss Base. And you see the first option this brings in is Axis of Revolution. I just have to select out one of the lines to revolve this profile about, and you can see what the effect of that is. Then I'll go ahead and exit out of that and modify the profile a bit. I'll go ahead and change two of these lines to construction geometries. I'll go back into the revolved boss base. In this case, we'll get an error message telling us the sketch is currently open. To create a closed revolution, we would have to have a closed sketch, but in this case, we're going to create what's called a thin revolution. You see the option for thin feature is checked. I'll just have to choose an axis of revolution. I'll choose that center line, and you can see the result of that. I can also change the thickness of our thin feature, as well as which side of that profile the thin feature is on. I'm going to go ahead and delete that out, and once again edit the sketch. In this case, I'm going to delete out these three lines and draw in a 3-point arc from the top of the line to the origin. And I'll just click that in at 180 degrees and go back into the revolved boss base. This is one of the common questions that comes up with revolves. How do you create a sphere? You just have to create a half of an arc, a line across, and choose that line as the axis of revolution. Now if I come back and edit the sketch, you can see it keeps a preview of the revolve, and you can get a pretty good idea of what your revolution is going to look like when you modify your profile. So now that I've introduced the concept of a revolved feature, I'll go ahead and delete out the revolve as well as the sketch, and we'll begin creating that wheel. To begin the wheel, we'll create a sketch on the right plane. I like to start off my revolved features with a center line, especially when they're more complex. It allows you to get a better picture of what you're revolving about and what your overall profile is going to look like. I'll go ahead and give this a dimension of 4.5 inches. That's going to be half the width of our part. And I'm also going to go ahead and drop a center line from our back point there. And I'll go ahead and give that a dimension from this top point and select the center line. And then I'm going to hover my mouse underneath that center line so I can get a diameter. And so we'll set this to a diameter of 18 inches. From here, I'll select the line tool and start drawing in several lines here. And then we'll go ahead and add in dimension to these. If this line for you isn't already defined by this point, you can control click those two and go ahead and make them coincident. And then we'll add in our dimensions. This is going to have a thickness of 3/8 of an inch. And a distance from these two of 1/4 of an inch. And lastly, this will also have a thickness of 3/8 of an inch. This represents half of our profile for the rim of the wheel. If you can imagine, this is going to extend out to the other side and revolve around this center axis. Before we do that, we're going to add in the profile for the hub and the spokes of the wheel. For that, we need the line tool, and we'll go ahead and drop a line from the center line. That's going to be about 2.5 inches long. And then we'll draw in a tangent arc just by pressing A, and link that tangent arc up to the rim. Then we want to give this some dimensions. This is going to be spaced from the front of the rim off by 1 inch. This line, once again, will have a height of 2.5 inches. And the radius of our arc is going to be 18 inches. From here, we're going to use the offset entities to create the other side of the profile for our hub and spokes. And that's going to be offset by a distance of 1 inch. And I'll add that in just by clicking on the other side of this line. And that'll drop the line right in. Next, I want to drag this top point and Control select this line and make those two coincident. And we'll do the same with that bottom point and that center line. Next, we'll add in some fillets to the top of our rim here. And those are going to have a radius of 0.15 inches. And we'll just choose the top two corners and this bottom corner here. Now I want to use the mirror entities to complete the profile of our rim here. I'll just select out all the lines that define this top section, and then we'll choose to mirror about that center line. Click OK. Now we're going to make sure we just have one closed profile. We'll do that by trimming away the inside of this using the power trim, and then by adding a line to the bottom of the profile. And lastly, we'll add fillets of 0.15 inches to both of the ends of the spokes. Now that we have our completed profile, we can go ahead and revolve it. And we just want to choose that bottom line as the axis of revolution. And in this case, 360 degrees is fine, as well as blind. So we'll just go ahead and click OK. Now that we've revolved the base of our wheel, we want to create the cutouts for the spokes. So we'll go ahead and create a sketch on the front plane. And we'll just go normal to it. And I'll first draw in some center lines. Then we'll give these spacing dimensions. Set this to 30 degrees. And the second one to 60 degrees. I'm going to use the offset entities to create part of our profile from this inside circle. That's going to be offset by 0.7 inches. And then I'm going to draw up a line vertical from the circle. And space this off by 1 inch. Next, I want to add another arc to the top. I'm going to do that using the 3-point arc tool. Click on that end point, the center line, and click the third time to add it in. Then I want to make this arc and this center circle concentric. And lastly, for that arc, we want to add a dimension. We'll give it a radius of 8 inches. From there, I'm going to use the trim entities and once again the power trim to remove out the excess portions of that profile. And then we want to use the sketch fillet tool to add in fillets at these 2 corners. And those are going to have a radius of 0.45 inches. Lastly, before we create our cut, we want to mirror the profile over. So we'll select out these 5 line and arc segments and choose to mirror about the center line. From here we can go into features, choose the extruded cut, and just rotate that to make sure it's going in the correct direction, and choose the through all end condition and click OK. This wheel is going to have 6 spokes, so we want to create 7 instances of this cutout. So we'll choose the circular pattern. In the features to pattern, just choose one of the inside faces, and that'll automatically populate the cut extrude 1. And for parameters, we'll choose this outside cylindrical face. We want to choose 7 instances of the cutout and the option for equal spacing. And because we're retaining the same geometry throughout the cuts, we want to use the geometry pattern option. Next, we'll add our mounting holes as well as a hole at the center of the face here. And so we'll just go ahead and create a sketch on that face. And I'll go ahead and hit spacebar, double click on normal 2 to get a little bit of a better view there. And I'll draw on a circle at the center. Then I'm going to draw up a center line from the origin vertically. I'll draw in another circle at that top point. And then I want to give these dimensions. I'll give this inside circle a dimension of 2 inches. I want to give the center line a dimension in millimeters because it's going to be a 5 by 100 bolt pattern. So you'll type in 50 and put an mm behind it for millimeters. And that'll automatically populate the inch dimension equivalent to 50 millimeters. Next, I'll set this diameter to 1/2 inch. And lastly, I want to add in one more circle, concentric to the bolt hole there. And we're going to make it tangent to the outside edge. That tangent relation isn't one that adds automatically, so I'm going to select the circle and control select the outside circle and choose to make the 2 tangent. From there, I'll go ahead and exit the sketch. And using that sketch we just created, we're going to create multiple cut extrusions. We're going to do that by using something called the contour select tool. You can access that by right-clicking, choosing the 2 arrows at the bottom, and choosing the contour select tool. The first contour we'll choose is this center circle. Then we'll choose Extruded Cut. Make sure it's in the right direction. And right click and choose Through All. Now since we're using that sketch, we want to be able to see it. I'll go ahead and open up the display pane. Open up the Cut Extrude feature and select the sketch to make it visible. Now we'll once again use the Contour Select tool, choosing the inside circle, and once again choosing an extruded cut. And that'll be through all as well. And lastly, I'm going to use that Contour Select tool one more time on this outside edge. And if I just select that edge, it's going to include this entire circle with no regard to this inner circle. That's not what we want. We actually just want this region. So if you click on that red highlighted region, it'll just select that area. Then we'll choose Extruded Cut. And in this case, we're going to change that depth to 1/4 of an inch. And click OK. Next, I'll go ahead and hide out that sketch. And we can close out that display pane. We'll need to create another circular pattern. So go ahead and choose the circular pattern feature. In the features to pattern box, I'll go into the feature tree on the right here and choose the Cut Extrude 4 and Cut Extrude 3. And for the parameters, I'll just select this inside circle. We want to change instances to 5 and click OK. The last features we'll need to create are the insets, or the inset cuts on all of the spokes. So I'll create another sketch on the front plane. And once again, I'll just go normal to that, make it a little bit easier to see. And then I'm going to choose the offset entities and select this edge. I'm going to set this at 0.3 inches and choose to reverse the direction. Click OK. And I'll choose the offset entities once again. Choose that edge. And I'll just click on the inside so it places that offset on the inside of the spoke there. Next, I'll grab the line tool and draw in lines to connect these points. Then we want to use the Smart Dimension tool to set this line off from the origin at 4 inches. I can see I get an error when I enter in that dimension. I should actually be able to move this. I'm going to go ahead and take a closer look. Once in a while, when you do add in lines, for some reason an extra line gets added in. I'll just go ahead and delete that out and make sure I can move this line as well as the top line. And then I'll go ahead and add in a dimension of 4 inches. And I'll add in a dimension here of 2.8 inches. Next, I want to make these two lines equal by control selecting them and choosing the equal relation. And lastly, I'm going to add some fillets of 0.1 inches to all 4 corners of this. And then I'll go ahead and go to the Features tab once again and choose Extruded Cut. Now if I take a look at this from the side, if I use the blind end condition, I'm going to get an angled cut here. I actually want a cut that runs parallel with that surface. So we're going to use a end condition of offset from surface and choose that front surface. In this case, I want an offset of 1/4 of an inch, but I want it into the part, not on the outside. So I'll choose to reverse the offset and click OK. And you can see now that that cut runs parallel to both the front and back surfaces. The last feature we need to complete the part is another circular pattern for that inset cut. So once again, we'll choose the circular pattern tool. Choose one of those inside faces to choose the cut extrude. For our parameters, once again, one of the available cylinders, and we'll create 7 instances. And I'll go ahead and click OK. And lastly, now that the geometry of the part is done, we just want to add in an appearance to make this part look a little bit more attractive. We'll go ahead and click on the part, or right click on it and choose Appearance. And click on the part itself. And then we'll come in over here on the right, go into the Appearances, into the Painted folder, and choose Car. And in this case, we're going to choose a steel gray and just drag and drop that on the part. Lastly, I want to make this a little darker. So I'll change to this gray here, and that'll retain the appearance of that paint, but it'll change the color to what we select. We'll go ahead and click OK. And then I want to add highlights to both these cutouts and our outside rim here. So first I'm going to Control select the cut extrude and the circular pattern. Go ahead and right click, choose Appearances, and choose the cut extrude. Choosing the cut extrude means it'll apply on the feature level. If we chose body, it would apply it to the entire body. And if we chose part, it would apply it to the entire part. The difference with body here is that if we had multiple bodies, we could choose different colors for the different bodies. But in this case, we want it to be feature level. I'm going to go ahead and select this orange color, click OK. And lastly, I'm going to click on this face. Once again, go to Appearance and choose to apply at the face level. And I'll go ahead and select that orange once again. And there we have our completed wheel.